Okay, back to our mark scheme then. So 1 mark for identification of a way of ensuring reliability. So for 1 mark, you don't want to be writing extensively, just a 1-word answer. Then, where are we? 1 mark for that. 2 marks for explanation and elaboration. So using 2 separate psychologists and then comparing them on that use of method. 3 marks for an accurate and clear explanation. So using those 2 separate psychologists to rate the typed accounts for accuracy and comparing or correlating the ratings to see how similar they are. So you get 4 marks for bringing in the fact that you have to run a correlation in order to check the significance. You could make a case for test-retest, so having the same psychologist examining or re-examining the ratings over a period of time. You can have that as well. So quick gap fill just to check everything that we've looked at so far. So pause this, that'll take about 10 minutes to do. And then there are the answers. Then we're on to validity, so the last part here. 5 questions as always, based on, or 6 questions based on previous knowledge. You need to guide some revision to. So do you know about working memory model? Can you remember interactional synchrony? And then these are the answers. Okay, nice. Right, validity then. So reliability is all about consistency. Validity is about accuracy. So how accurate is a data set? How accurate is a measure that you're using and the results? So it comes down to truth, how true something is. So are they measuring what they should be measuring? We've got different types and different ways of checking validity. So we've got face validity, and then we split into external and internal validity. Got a knowledge organizer for you to work through for the different descriptions for each of them. And you think of a bit of research as well to back it up. That would be even better, because AO3, you can bring in research methods to really bulk that up. So it's also about generalization. So not only is it important for something to be accurate and true, can it be generalized to other people, other situations, other cultures? If it can, then it's said to have good internal and good external validity. So, like we mentioned before, something can be consistent but not accurate, and it can be reliable but not valid. So if the scales were broken, they might be consistent and therefore reliable, but they're not truly measuring your actual rate, so it's not valid. So it's one to say you can't say something is definitely reliable and valid. So if we start with internal validity, so this is where how much the findings of the dependent variable actually have to do with the manipulation of the variable. So how true is something? Is it measuring what it should be? So if we think of Milgram, how many Milgram's participants actually continued through the experiment because they were blindly obeying? Other factors that were not taken into consideration? Or was it demand characteristics, staying along because they felt like they had to? External validity is taking the findings beyond the study. So can they be generalized to different people? That's population validity, or to different areas in society, and that's ecological validity. So can we take the findings that we found at Yale University and apply that to a school setting? Can we apply it to a hospital setting? Does it have good ecological validity? So in order for it to be high, to have high ecological validity, the setting in which it takes place has to have an element of mundane realism. Mundane realism means everyday life. So field experiments have really good mundane realism because they are out in the field. They're in a setting that is used day to day, that people experience day to day. So it has good mundane realism. Example then, asking someone to remember a list of random words in a lab experiment has low ecological validity. It's not in an everyday setting. Whereas asking someone to remember a list of random words in a shopping centre is an everyday setting, so it still has low ecological validity because it's not an everyday task, but we have mundane realism because we are in a real everyday situation. Okay, so you've got external and internal. Now we need to look at how we assess validity. Again, a question that they love. So the simplest technique to test for validity is to bring in an expert. Have an independent expert, look at the measure being used. No fancy tests. They've just got to look at what you're putting forward, and is it going to measure what it should? We call that face validity. It's the easiest, simplistic, I don't think that scientific way of assessing validity. So if you're doing a questionnaire or if you're looking at intelligence, you would bring in somebody who was an independent expert in that field. They'd look at your questionnaire and say, okay, yeah, that's going to measure what it should do. Concurrent validity is where you compare the new procedure that you've created with a similar procedure that's already out there. So take IQ again. You've created this IQ test. You're going to compare it to something that already exists. Give your participants both of the tests. You then take the results, run a Spearman's row. Is there a correlation between the two? If it is at plus 0.8, then we can say that your test is now valid. Temporal is my favourite, temp mean time, which is basically, are the results from a study generalisable from that time period to now, basically. So if we take something like Milgram or Ash is being criticised because in the 1950s, people were more likely to conform and go with the group. Whereas now, if we were to repeat Ash's experiment, which we have done, nobody said the wrong line. Everybody said the right one because we live in a bit more of an independent society. So it doesn't have temporal validity. Freud as well. Penis envy, not a thing now. Ever was a thing? Probably not a thing. So, in a more Victorian society when it was developed, where men were more prominent in society, there wasn't a lot of go away. There wasn't a lot of feminism. Whereas now we're at a place where that just wouldn't be acceptable in society. So what type of validity is this? Extent to which a psychological measure relates to an existing measure. Of course, that's concurrent. Extent to which findings can be generalised to other historical times and eras. Temporal. And then findings from research can be generalised to other settings and situations. Ecological. Okay, fill in the blanks then. Use these terms in the pink box to just refresh yourself, refresh your memory. 5 minutes. Then double check your answers. And we're on to improving validity. So as well as assessing it, checking that something is valid, we need to know, how do we improve it? If we needed to make it better, what would we do? So if we take an experiment, to be sure that the independent variable is having an effect on the dependent variable, then we need to use a control group. So how would you improve an experiment? You bring in a control group, because then you are definitely assessing if something is having any kind of go away significance. When we control variables, you need standardization. So if you have things more standardized and everybody's doing the same thing, you reduce the investigator and double demand characteristics. And also bringing in double blind, single blind improves that, because they don't know what group they're in. They can't change their behavior. Improving it with questionnaires then is bringing in a lie scale. So quite a lot of questionnaires have these already, where you might find they put the same question twice. That's to assess whether or not you are being accurate with your responses, to check you're awake. They do that as well to control for social desirability bias, and making things anonymous, making things more confidential means that you're encouraging a bit more truthfulness. With observations, they usually have quite a lot of high ecological validity, usually if they're covert. But if your behavioural categories are too broad and not as specific as they need to be, that's a way of clearing it up. Have it really operationalised, that will improve your validity. Improving goal qualitative methods. So if you're using an interview, then they're obviously going to have good ecological validity because they are, in the moment, they're true to life. But interpretative validity needs to be demonstrated. So the researcher has to show that the interpretation matches the reality in which the participants are in. So direct quotes from the report can really boost that. Triangulation is a good one as well. So making sure you're not just using one method. So having an observation, an experiment, and a case study or an interview really bulks up the accuracy of your data. And then we've got some questions for you to have a look at. So have a read of this first. Underline the key bits or highlight the key bits of the question. And then again, you've got a 4-marker. What is meant by internal validity? Describe how the internal validity of the happiness questionnaire could be assessed. So not improved, but assessed. They want a step-by-step process here, how it can be assessed. So your 1 marker is just going to be something like, so internal validity, how accurately a test measures what it should be measuring, 1 mark. 2 ways you can assess internal validity. You can use concurrent, so compare it to a similar happiness score, one that's already existing. Face validity, get an expert in who can just have a look at the general questions. Are they measuring happiness? Maybe even add an lie scale to check their responses. Then this is the best video I've ever seen in my whole life, and it will help you remember validity really well. And there is points if you can replicate this dance. So have a watch.
Okay, so
I'll leave that for you. Then if you need a bit more help, if you're not really sure on validity or reliability, I've uploaded the textbook pages from the pink-haired girl. Refresh yourself over those, answer some more questions, and then let me know if you're stuck.